and Bible School Radio 91.3 KDKR Decatur, Dallas, Fort Worth, and on 91.3 KYJC Commerce.
Portions of KDKR programming do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, how long does it really take to pay off a credit card? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon, this is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, the world of minimum payments and what you need to know. Credit expert Wayne Sanford is here today to talk about getting credit card debt paid off once and for all. Wayne, welcome to Prudent Money.
Appreciate coming back.
You know, America is in debt like no other time in history, and credit card debt, of course, is at an all-time high as well. Consumers think that all they have to do is pay what that credit card company says to pay, and at some point, they're going to be out of debt. Why is that a recipe for disaster, Wayne?
A while back, they made changes to some of the way that they do the billing, and if most people, we don't just look, we'll look at the minimum payment, and most people say whether it's $25, $350, whatever the case may be, they'll say, you know what, let me pay an extra $25 or $50, thinking that has an incredibly huge impact, and it really doesn't. You know, they always say when you look at something on paper and write it down, that's when it becomes too real. Well, if you take that credit card statement and you scroll down and you look at the part that says take the minimum payment and this card will be paid off in 27 years, that's when it becomes real.
So is there I've never really looked, is there a formula or anything that produces that minimum payment? Is it pretty consistent amongst credit card companies? How's that work?
There is typically what I have seen, and obviously it's always going to be reflective on the interest rate, but most of the time if somebody tells me their minimum payment is, let's just say $300, I'm going to say then most likely $150, maybe $170 of that is going to be interest. So it's usually about 60% of the minimum payment, which of course scares everyone when you say that out loud, but until you look, you don't know.
So, I was listening to one of these debt consolidation commercials, and this just jumped out at me. It started out with the consumer stating it would take 47 years to get out of debt with their credit card company. I mean, this was an outrageous amount of time. However, of course, if the consumer signed up with the debt consolidation company, it would be 5 years. It's amazing how that 42 years just went away. You know, first, let's start with the 47 years. I mean, is that even a possible calculation? I think you'd have to be paying in the mid 30 percentile range on interest or something for it to be an outrageous number like 47 years.
Well, I tell you, if you look around these days, most of the time the interest rates are going to be between that 20 and 25 or even 30+%. Now, you never want to actually, I mean, all credit cards are like this, and I never really want to say, oh, I saw this credit card company, but a lender sent me, I asked a customer for a bank statement, so I could discover what the information was on the statement, and then it actually said make the minimum payment, and this will be paid off in 47 years. I actually never saw, and it's funny you mentioned the number 47, but I've never seen 47 before. I see 17 all the time. I see 27, 32, but 47, that was a shocker.
I've always wondered this, never really asked the question, is there a law that puts a cap on this as far as how high credit card companies can go with their debt on interest rates?
There really isn't. I mean, I'm sure there's some obscure law, because I remember, and this is going back to probably right around after the crash that we had in '08, and there's a credit card company called First Premier Bank. They're one of those companies that you go to when you really have no choice.
Right.
And that's just that's their market. That's what they do. They charge a bunch of fees, and that's how they make their money. And they give you, people that really have just had horrible times paying cards. And again, a credit score is a risk score. It measures payment history. So if you got a really bad history, you're not going to get the good stuff. And there was a time that they experimented, and I want to say it was 89% interest.
89%.
Yet that is not stuttering. That is not a mistake. It was 89.99%. And it blew my mind away. I mean, thanks to the internet, it's always everywhere. So I'm sure if you Googled it, you could probably find a couple of stories when they tried to do this. As you would imagine, didn't really work out too well. But the fact that it was attempted was mind-blowing.
What amazes me is that politicians are just allowing this to happen. They're allowing credit card companies to do whatever they want to do. And, you talked about the financial crisis in 2008 was when the last time we saw something really explode, if you will, with credit card debt. But what worries me about this whole situation, Wayne, is that there's a huge, huge difference between what happened in 2008 and what could happen here. It makes me wonder, and it all comes back down to interest rates. They're outrageous. They're so much higher than they were back in 07 and 08. It makes me wonder if the consumer is just going to, as a whole, kind of revolt and just default on these accounts because the high interest rate debt. I mean, if you do the math, it's almost impossible to get out of it.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm sure you probably have heard on radio and TV where they're talking, and this is probably more with the millennials, where they're saying, look, at the price of homes nowadays, there's no way I'm going to be able to purchase a house. I'm just not going to pay my student loans or not going to pay bills because why bother when I can't afford it anyway? And it's just one of those, at some point you'd think they would just give up, but, unfortunately life just doesn't work that way. Something's going to happen in some capacity. There was always an old DVD, and I don't even think it's streamed, so DVD might be the only way you can get your hands on it, but I tell people about this all the time. It's called In Debt We Trust, and I mentioned this on one of your shows one time where a professor from Harvard was actually talking to the heads of Bank of America. And she was talking, hey, if you make these adjustments in your credit card approvals, you could cut down 50% of the people that file bankruptcy. And obviously somebody files bankruptcy, meaning Chapter 7, they don't have to pay anything. And they said the head honcho made a comment, and everybody stopped and listened, and they said, those are the 2% of people where we make our money. Mm-hmm. So they don't want. They tell you, "Oh, we've got credit cards for you in case you need them," and then when you start using them, they penalize you for it. Lower your limit, like you have a $3,000 limit, you're maxed out. They decide to cut you down to $2,000. You're 150% maxed out now on the credit card, dropping your score even worse. Late fees over the limit fees, finance charges get adjusted, all that crazy domino effect stuff. But, they're talking out of both sides of their mouth. They don't want you to do it because that's what they say in public, but that's what they want you to do because that's how they make their money.
Oh, and a lot of money they make, too. Don't kid yourself. If you want more information on Wayne, let me give out your website, WayneTheCreditGuy.com. Let's talk a little bit, about the possibility of defaults. And I almost feel like, and this is based on some of the stories I've heard just recently, I want to hear what you're hearing, but this feels a lot like 07 and 08, where we're watching, the card. I guess it was called the Card Act that President Obama at the time signed into law, yes, and gave credit card companies all of the time in the world to get ready for the changes that were going to happen. Cut credit limits. Just raise interest rates to the point that they need them, and these types of efforts. When you look at it today, it seems like the credit card companies are, of course, noticing the defaults and the possibility of that, and they're starting to take preemptive measures by decreasing credit lines and closing accounts. Is that something that you're seeing, or is that just kind of maybe something I've seen on kind of a one-off basis?
I'm going to say yes, but with a twist. So back when, you could strategically not pay your bills and still qualify for a mortgage pre-crash.
Yes.
And what happened was, if you've ever seen those movies, Too Big to Fail, that one, The Big Short, they had such wide, they wanted more and more, the banks wanted to make more money, so they make their guidelines and restrictions a lot less. Obviously, you get people that can't pay the way they normally would to and start defaulting, and that's how we had the whole domino effect. And then, of course, what happens right after that sort of a crash, they tighten their belt so hard that unless you fit a certain profile, you can't get anything. You can start to see the remnants of that again, because everything started off with a little defaulting here, a little defaulting there, and then it starts building up.
This is Bob. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the impact on the credit score when a credit card company closes an account. And this is what I don't think consumers really get, and it's not a good thing. It does remove available credit, or could remove available credit, and affects the credit utilization ratio. Talk a little bit about that.
So one of the components of what they call the 5 factors of credit is credit history. So if you think about it, a credit score is basically a 3-digit number that tells the lender how you pay your bills. It's primarily measuring what you're paying today. A lot of things that people don't realize is, let's say you finally finished paying off your car, now you don't have a car payment, which is fantastic from a debt perspective. But they're now closing that account and taking it out of the active section and putting it into, let's say in this case, the good but paid and closed section. Well, if you're removing a portion of the credit history that you are currently paying on day to day, so to speak, that actually lowers your score. You have a credit card, which credit cards affect your scores a lot more than what's called an installment account, which is a car payment, a student loan, a mortgage, in essence, the type, which means installment means a dollar amount divided by time frame. The dollar amount's always the same. It doesn't change. Credit cards are always changing. Pay a lot, pay a little, use a lot, use a little. So that's constantly changing. So that's going to affect your score for good or bad a lot more. They close that card, and then you have a balance.
I'm going to have to interrupt you here, Wayne, up against the break. Hey, this is Bob Brooks. Sure. Stick around. We'll be right back. Hi, this is Bob Brooks, host of the Prudent Money Radio Show. For most people, the 401k plan is the most important part of the retirement plan process. At the same time, knowing how to invest, well, it's a challenge, considering that you're given a list of investments and expected to know which ones to choose. What if I told you that there is just one investment process that you need to understand? If you had to narrow it down to one thing to know, this would be it. On May 7th and May 9th, I'm going to be presenting a webinar entitled The 401k Plan, The One Thing You Need to Know. If you are unsure about your 401k plan, this is your opportunity to learn something that can change your retirement future. In addition, I'm also going to give you some ideas on what to do with your accounts outside of your 401k plan. Well, today, sign up at www.prudentmoney.com to learn how to increase the probabilities of success with your 401k plan.
Dr. Charles Stanley.
The devil has defeated every single servant of God. The only person that the devil's never defeated is Jesus Christ. And when Jesus Christ gets on the inside of us, what does he do? He equips us to be winners and not losers. That is, he wants you to win in your spiritual life.
The teaching of Dr. Charles Stanley on In Touch, helping you grow in Christ every day.
In Touch, weekdays at 12:30, here on KDKR.
Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. I do appreciate it. Talking to Wayne Sanford about credit and what could be coming down the pike. What's an interesting situation is that the possibility of what credit card companies might do, and there's for some people, they may have a couple of credit cards with maybe $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 worth of credit limit on there, and they're saving those in the case that they do have an emergency fund. It's not ideal, but it is it does work. Is there any steps that they can take to make sure that their credit lines don't get closed or reduced? Anything they could do?
Sure. The problem is, I want to unfortunately say no, because understand that the credit limits that you have, it's like a driver's license. It's a privilege, not a right.
Right.
The bank is loaning you the ability to charge up to a certain amount for good times or bad times. If they decide at their discretion, which, there's a reason why when you get that credit card in the mail and you see all the paperwork that comes with it, there's a reason why all the conditions are in a .01 font. Where you'd actually need to get a microscope in order to actually read and
Right.
read everything legibly. There's
Sure.
a reason for that, is they can pull it at any time. During the crash, I think I saw an article by Forbes that said there was about $3.8 trillion of available credit lines out there, and they cut it literally by 50% to like 1.7. So, people that were doing really well that had American Express, no limits. All of a sudden, boom, they had a limit. And you can argue, of course, you can then provide some documentation to say, look, my finances have not changed, because when you fill out that application and you tell them this is what you make, they can't contact the IRS to confirm that that's what you're actually
Yes.
making. So they're taking your word for that.
Yeah, let me jump in and say something on that, because I got a letter. I talked about this yesterday on the radio. I got a letter from an email from a listener, and she said that she's been with the bank since the mid-'90s, never been late a day in her life. I mean, the perfect ideal customer. And because she wasn't updating that information, and I'd never heard of this before, because she was not updating it, they were shutting that card down and closing the account. And I just, what dawned on me, and confirm this if this is right or not, but what I suspected is that's their way of making sure there's some consistency and that they are getting at least consistent, true answers.
Well, it's also a combination of that, but at the same time, too, if you think about it, like I said, they have X amount of dollars of credit available out there for people. You get your older adult that, let's say, has that $10,000, $20,000 limit. They only put $1,000 or $2,000 on the card, pay it off, whether it's the following month or possibly within the next 2 months. The bank's not really making any money, are they?
Right.
So they're taking all that risk with no reward. So from a business perspective, which that's what they do, why would you do that when you can give it to somebody else that may start maxing it out and then start paying it consistently, but all of a sudden start paying the minimum payment and now paying all those fees?
Yeah, it's an awfully big business, and it only works if people are using the credit. That's for sure. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Wayne Sanford's with me today, and talking about credit cards and what to do in such an unusual situation. Feels a lot like 07, 08, and the rate we're going. If you want more information about Wayne, WayneTheCreditGuy.com is where you go. One of the things that concerns me, Wayne, is that and we talked a little bit about this earlier on the program during the first segment, but that consumers will actually go to these debt consolidation companies, and they buy into the lie that this is something that's going to fix everything. And some of the worst advice given ever with credit, I mean, it's unbelievable, is that they tell you to go out there and default on your credit accounts before they can start. Just talk about how bad that advice is.
It's what I tell everyone is, here's the reality. If you're current, paying on time, and I just recently had someone maybe 2 weeks ago ask me this question, and I'll try to be short because I'm semi-long-winded.
Go ahead.
But they were like, hey, Wayne, I owe $10,000. I just can't do it, so can you help me settle it for $5,000 with them? And I said, no, because why would they settle? He was a little surprised at that, but I said, why would they settle? You've been paying them on time. They don't have a problem with that. If you're late 30 days, 45 days here and there, so they're still getting paid. They might be a little bit later. If it starts going 60 days late, they're still willing to do. They may up the interest rate, because I believe, if I remember correctly, 60 days is late is usually the trigger where they can increase the rate. And then all of a sudden 90 days. Once it starts hitting 90 days and hitting 120 days, now they start getting nervous. And now all of a sudden they're reconsidering their position and trying to say, okay, this is not going in the direction we want it to go. What do we need to do? Now all of a sudden they're willing to discuss a little bit of a settlement. Or you might have people that have listened to this heard that all of a sudden they have a hardship program to help you. It's not helping you, it's helping them. So don't believe that for 1 second. It's like watching the commercials and they talk about so-and-so bank, how we consider everyone a family. That's a bunch of malarkey. They don't care about you in the slightest. It's always loyalty to us, not our loyalty to you, and that goes for jobs and just all that crazy stuff. So until it hits 120 plus days late, that's when they're willing to start talking. These debt settlement companies, they're great with twisting their words. I have a gentleman that, because of a divorce, and let's say they were a little bit high-end, $260,000 in credit card debt and personal loans. This company gave him he was paying $6,000. Oh, we can get it down to $3,000. Well, all they did, they're going to let everything go. They're going to start negotiating and then try to come up with settlements. But the problem is they're just going to want to get the settlement done as quickly as possible because they're still making money. They make 20 to 25% of the debt, not what they settled, the total amount. So this guy was getting charged almost $60,000, but they don't really go through that because all they harp on is the $3,000 he's paying because he was paying $6,000. And isn't $3,000 fantastic? And that's how they focus. And he's not stupid. And he fell for it. It's only until he reached out to me that I just pointed a few things out, and then he just got slightly annoyed at those other people.
Right, sure.
Yeah.
The other thing, too, Wayne, is that these companies also act as if you can't incur any legal action against you. Like you're shielded from that.
Literally what I was going to say.
I was reading your mind. Okay, so talk about how that's not true.
So what happens is, in the state of Texas, or just pretty much everywhere else, the kind of standard rule is 4 years. Now, there are some that are 10, some 7, some 3. When your account gets charged off for a credit card, that's 6 months. For an installment loan, that's 4 months. That lender has the ability to sue or sell the debt to a debt buyer who can then turn around and sue you. So if you look at these problems of what they're promising, you're going to be paying X amount of dollars into a little savings account. Once that account builds up, we'll then go and settle these accounts. Well, depending on how many you have, you're getting a bunch of them that are defaulting probably at the same time or reasonably close. Well, in the fine paperwork that you fill out, it's going to say, oh, we could refer you to an attorney, and here's what they're going to charge you. But they're creating the problem. I've talked to people and say, look, if you have to do this, you need to go into it with wide eyes. Let me explain the reality of what you're dealing with, and then let me arm you with the information so at least you can make an informed decision that protects you and gives you everything so you know what's going on. You have 5 credit cards. You want to focus on, let's say, the first one to settle. Well, 7-8 months from now, number 5 decides to sue you. Well, number 5 now takes priority over number 1. So you have to handle that accordingly. They don't care. That's not their job. That's not what they do. And you sign the paperwork under paragraph 7, if under subsection B47 or whatever, however that works, that says that you are aware of that. And it's your fault because guess what? You should have read what you signed. That's how they get you on that stuff, and that's why you have so many people that dislike companies like that because it's like a used car salesman.
Real quick, we just got about half a minute left. Let's talk a little bit about, to me, there's a big debate within social media. Is the consumer in good shape or not? All the statistics that I've seen, it doesn't really look like a good thing that consumers are in good shape. What are you seeing?
I'm seeing that they're not. At the end of the day, the money is still the same. They're still working. They're still making money. But, like we see everywhere, the price of gas, I just paid, I think, like $3.60, $3.70. I had a quarter of a tank. It cost me like $25, which is mind-blowing. And all the food pricing and everything like that.
Right.
Because of those factors is why I had a lady that was going to Target buying food, and there's some sort of credit card that's buy here, pay now. And I was like, but you're going to have to go back and buy more. But that's what they were doing for a variety of different reasons. But she thought also it was going to help her credit, and what a surprise, it ended up hurting it. But that's what's going on. And then you start seeing some car payments. There's reports that car payments are starting to go 30 days, sometimes 60 days late, and these are people with 600-plus credit scores. So you can see the remnants, and this is kind of looking like 08 again.
Wayne, great to have you on. WayneTheCreditGuy.com is the website. You can go check out more information about Wayne. Hey, thanks, Wayne. Appreciate you coming back.
Appreciate you. Take care.
This is Bob Brooks. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time. Keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.